Welcome to this first Map the System session. It's really, really exciting that we're getting this kicked off, especially, and I feel like every single webinar online video for the last 9 months has said this, but it's really exciting to get this kicked off in spite of COVID and all that sort of stuff. It'll be a bit different to normal, especially being away from each other. But at the same time, this kind of presents an opportunity for Map the System to take a little bit of a different path. Today's session is an information session that we're going to be going over what the basics are for Map the System, what system thinking is, what the program is. We're going to also look at all sorts of things around how to register and what the requirements are. We're joined today by Kense Khadebe. She's from the Bertha Centre. If you want to say hi, Kense.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Really looking forward to today.
Awesome. Thanks, Kense. So Kense is the project manager from the Bertha Centre on this project. I got it right. From the systems and social innovation team, or the social innovation and system team. One of that team. Thank you so much for joining in on this as well, Kense. I'm going to just wait 1 or 2 more seconds if there's anyone else that's joining to dive in there. So it's an exciting thing to be doing Map the System again this year. In fact, I think from UCT's side, this is going to potentially be the biggest Map the System that we've done. We are able to launch this a lot quicker now that it's online, less logistics around hosting in-person information sessions. So we're really looking forward to this being one of the biggest and best. And I'm going to state it right here nice and early so we can put our sort of mark in the sand. I really think it's time for UCT to win this. We've been participating 4 years and our teams have done phenomenally well. We've had teams in the top 5 or 6. We've had teams reach the final and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's an incredible talent pool that's part of this Map the System competition, and also just an incredible group of people that are here to support. And so let's see if we can bring a South African team to win this year. So I'm going to get started now. Oh, go for it, Kense.
Yeah, before you kick off, I just wanted to say that there is a Q&A section at the bottom. So if you guys want to ask any questions, please drop them in there. And then Rowan, I don't know if you'll have time at the end of your presentation, maybe we can answer some of those questions. And I know you guys aren't allowed to speak now because we've muted you, but when we get to that section, I'll unmute you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kense. And if there are questions that come in, about a specific slide, I'm happy for us to chat about those as we come along. There's also going to be time at the end for us to chat and ask questions as well. Cool. Let's kick us off. So we're going to start off with the agenda for the session. So we're looking at the overview of the competition, like what it's about, why this competition exists, where it comes from, etc., etc. We've got a brief thing on what is systems thinking, but a reminder that there's going to be a number of different webinars for this for Map the System. So we're going to go deeper into systems thinking and how to set this up. So this is just the first, and it's just a way of getting us thinking about that. Then some of the more admin stuff, how to register as an individual or a team, how to join a team if you don't have one, how to select a topic or interest area, and then the process of putting together a portfolio for submission. Now that's something that we'll mostly cover towards the end, but I want us to start thinking about that now. On the bottom right there, you'll see that was the first team when we were when I was participant in the competition in 2016, and we got to present on the main stage at Oxford. Again, we're hoping that this happens this year, but even if it doesn't happen, we had a phenomenal week with it this year in 2020, with a lot of really cool interactions online. And obviously there's the prizes as well to keep us all pointing in that direction. I think the winning team gets £3,000, which in rands, if my numbers don't fail me, is about 60,000 Rand to follow your topic a lot more closely. As you can see, there was a lot less COVID times and a lot more haircuts happening as well. All right. So what is Map the System? What is this competition? Why should we enter it? What's the purpose of this whole thing? In the background there is a lady called Daniela Pappy Thornton. In fact, I probably shouldn't have covered her face up with this giant box. But so Daniela is the person that started the competition. It was an idea of hers in 2012 or 2013, and it was part of the Oxford School Centre's idea around entrepreneurship. And the the sort of the core ideology behind Map the System is that, we get caught up in the whole idea of heropreneurship, which is a term basically where we consider, we look at entrepreneurs that are going and solving social problems, and everyone will come up with an idea and a solution. It'll just be like, the idea will be the core of what it is. You'll say, I want to fix, let's call it COVID. I want to fix COVID. I'm going to come up with a, vaccine. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up with one vaccine. I'm going to fix COVID. I'm going to come up with a vaccine. But what the actual thinking here with this competition was, and with the whole idea about systems thinking and systems entrepreneurship, is to go beyond that idea of a silver bullet, the idea of one person can fix all of this with one idea. Ideas are important, social enterprises are important, but if we start looking at the whole system, we can start understanding how we can not only be entrepreneurs within the system, but how we can pull the different actors together and make real systemic and impactful change. And so what Map the System is it's a chance to showcase that, a chance to learn, a chance to teach, a chance to explore social issues deeply, and a chance to actually go beyond just the surface level stuff and actually dive in to what the roots of a system failure or a system issue is. So, for example, if we take that idea of COVID, maybe we might, instead of looking at, how would Rowan create a vaccine, to how would Rowan instead look at the system that's in place in South Africa for when a COVID vaccine comes. So, who are the major actors? Who are the major players? Who are the social organizations involved? How is the Department of Health handling it? What systems have been built? What systems will need to be in place? And then where are the gaps? So the theory behind Map the System is to also look at what is the existing problem, like what is the existing landscape, who are the main actors in that landscape, kind of looking at where are we now, what should the system look like, and then finding the gaps in between. So your research project might entirely be based, again, if we're using COVID as an example, your project might entirely be based on, what distribution systems do we have in South Africa and where are the gaps in the system? And that can be far more useful sometimes than just coming up with a single idea. So yeah, that's Map the System. And then on why you should enter. So this competition is a place where people who are passionate about systems change, let me rephrase that, where people are passionate about change in general. If you look at something and you say, that could be better, why is that missing this? I'd love to start, I'm passionate about this problem and I'd like to solve it. This is why you should enter. If you are passionate about a problem, if you'd like to solve a problem, if you'd like to understand a system, this is the perfect area where you can get the support to explore that idea and be able to challenge it. So yeah, what is Map the System? It's an incredible competition hosted by the University of Oxford, looking at systems entrepreneurship. It's got about 40 partner universities. We are one of 2 or 3 on the continent. And there's teams that come from all over the world. There's a couple of teams from China. There's teams that come from South America, from the United States of America. I'm sure they have lots of systems problems they could look at. Looking at, there's actually a really, really big grouping of universities in Canada. I think there's 15 universities, and they have a Canada-wide regional competition as well. So that's Map the System, with the idea that the top teams from every region and university go to Oxford, which is super cool. Might not happen again next year, COVID dependent, but again, we'll do it online. And why you should enter: if you are passionate about changing the system, if you're passionate about social change, this is the ideal ground for you to get the opportunity to explore that. So, what is systems thinking? Now, I managed to find a great quote here from Adisa, who is the course convener of the Systems Change and Social Impact course at the Bertha Centre, but also one of the leaders at the Bertha Centre, one of the people that have really helped drive this competition forward, but also have really been involved in systems thinking deeply at the Bertha Centre. So her definition of systems thinking is that systems thinking enables us to navigate the complexities of poverty, climate change, gender-based violence, to name a few. But getting all these change makers in a room together, funders, social entrepreneurs, policymakers, the idea is to capacitate them with a common language and resource set that better positions them to think and work collaboratively across sectors and therefore initiate positive systems. Now, that's a mouthful, and it's an incredible quote. Essentially, what you're looking at here is that system thinking takes us as a chance, well, gives us a chance to look at issues, bring together all of the different components of those issues, bring together the different people that are passionate about them, are there, government, policymakers, funders, etc., and to get them all going together and pointing in the same direction. And so an example that I'll cover in future webinars is my own experience with systems thinking. When we did our competition for that we went to Oxford with, we were looking at community policing, and it was really interesting for us because we noticed that there was an uptick, or well, not really an uptick, it was actually just like in the news really frequently were issues around murder and crime that had happened in Cape Town. And we thought to ourselves, how, with all of the problems, well, all the technology that exists in our world, how do we not have solutions to this? So our initial idea was, we're going to make a panic button. When you press that panic button, it's going to alert the police. And that was our, so it literally started with an idea. And then that idea moved into a systems thinking lens, because what happened is that we said, okay, let's say if you press the button, it goes to the police. So we tried to go to the police station and say to them, will you respond if we press the police button? And they said no, because they wouldn't, they weren't allowed to by national level to do that, but also they didn't have the systems in place to be able to do those sorts of responses. And again, I'll chat about this in more detail in another session, but we moved away from taking the concept of just creating a device to fix the system, and we started unpacking the system itself. And we were able to see that the entire community safety system that exists in Cape Town specifically, a little bit more generally within South Africa, is really upheld by all sorts of different things that influence, violence and crime and that sort of thing, include factors like things around mental health, drug usage, poverty is an intersectional issue with an issue of crime. And we often look at them very, very separately. We'll say, okay, there's lots of criminals, there's lots of crime or violence, but poverty is part of that. Support systems in place, our correctional services in South Africa, and how, they might not work as well as they could. And then in terms of how community safety exists in South Africa, we found that the most effective organizations in community safety are actually the community organizations, the neighborhood watch groups, the community policing forums. In fact, the police and Metro Police only existed in a space when something had happened, not as a way to have the system, work better. So they were very reactionary. And so that gave us a chance to look through different lenses about different organizations, who are the major players. And we got to go and present this at Oxford, which was incredible. But what was also cool is that we then took all of our research, and we realized that, especially at the time, I was in my first year of my master's, I just finished my undergraduate at UCT, and I didn't have the clout to, go to the police minister and say, we can completely gut the system, and maybe if we put tech in and that sort of stuff. There was no way I was anywhere near that. And what ended up happening instead was that we went and approached a safety app in South Africa called Namola, and we said to them, here, take our research, take all of our information, and we're actually able to tell them that one of the best ways to get community response to emergency situations is actually to leverage community organizations. And so a couple of months after that, they actually implemented that, which was really cool. Now, when you use the Namola app, it also can alert neighborhood watch groups in your area, which was something that wasn't there before. And by doing that, by coordinating between entrepreneurs, policymakers, police, community watch groups, etc., we got an overview of the whole system and where some of the failures were. And we saw some of the solutions that exist. And we said, okay, we could make those solutions slightly better if we did this. And that's the whole thrust of it. And eventually, on the other side of a systems thinking analysis or a systems thinking project, once you get to the other side of a systems thinking project, the idea is that then you can either launch a business off of it, a social enterprise, an NGO, maybe even just a purely for-profit business, and you can fix that gap, you can plug that hole, you can make a change in the system, or you can coordinate with other partners in the system. So the idea is that you don't look at it from one angle, one lens, one idea. Systems thinking goes far broader than that. And we'll cover these sort of topics in more detail when we have future webinars. So now that you know what systems thinking is and you know what the Map the System program is, how do we enter Map the System? The team on the bottom right there, that is the winning team from the 2019 Map the System year. There's another picture of them further down the line. Incredible team called Masfunde. They ended up going to Oxford. They had some incredible stories there. They made some amazing friends. In fact, I think they're still in contact with the friends that they made from Canada, which was really cool. And yeah, they did an incredible job and got to go across to Oxford. And so how do you enter? How do you get involved with this? So participation is, you can do it as an individual or a team of up to 5 people. So you can do it entirely on your own if you need to, or you can pair up with a friend, a colleague, etc. The requirement is that at least one student, one team member must be a current or recent graduate of UCT. Either the Bertha Centre or at within the Bertha Centre, the GSB, the Graduate School of Business, or the main campus, or any of the other campuses of the University of Cape Town. Eventually, we want to be able to start bringing more universities in South Africa around this, but that's part of the plan for 2022. But there needs to be one current student as part of that. And the student may have done an undergraduate, diploma, postgraduate, or doctoral level. So if you're from another university, or if you're passionate about these social issues, but haven't recently graduated or aren't a current student at UCT, what we can do is we can pair you up with a UCT student, or we'd highly recommend finding one yourself and being able to say, right, I see somebody who's passionate about the same thing that I am, and they're a recent UCT student, we can form a team with them. So even if you are outside of UCT, you can still participate in this competition. So yeah, as mentioned in that next bullet point, non-students or students from another institution can join a team at least as long as one member is part of the UCT environment. In terms of registration deadline, so registration happens way before the submission date, and the submission date sits further down the line, obviously. So registration deadline is Sunday, the 31st of January. We'd highly encourage you to register before that. Don't wait until that point. Get started on your projects. So, if you already know what topic you want to start exploring, get started on that as soon as possible. The reason there's a registration deadline is that they want everyone to be registered and to be able to give themselves enough time to put their research together. And then the final submission, I think, is in April, but I'll need to confirm that. Yeah, Ken says nodding over there, so that's April. Okay, cool. So yeah, please, if you are keen, register as soon as possible. Even if you decide not to submit a project, that's the important thing. Register so you can be part of it, so you can get the emails, so you can come on board with us. And there's going to be all sorts of support that exists as well. So we're going to have multiple webinars. Kense and I will be on standby to help teams, but we'll also bring on former team members to actually teams to actually help mentor on this program. And yes, to enter on it or to find out the more information about it, go to the website mapthesystem.sbs.ox.ac.uk, or just Google Map the System Oxford or Map the System. It'll come up as the first search result. And yeah, just go register on there. The registration isn't too complex. You just have to put all of your team details there. So your team member number 1 or your group lead. So that's one of the important things, is make sure you have a group lead. And then it just asks for your topic, but that can be changed. So if you haven't finalized your topic yet, don't worry, it can evolve. And in fact, even Team Masfunde, they were looking at the very start of their project, they were just looking at why literacy rates are so low. And the final project that they won for over there was around teacher preparedness. So your topics can evolve, they can change, and that's 100% okay. Just put down a broad area that you'd like to work in, and it's okay if it changes. Right. So how do you choose your topic? How do you choose your topic? Where do you start? How do you know you're on the right track? All of those sorts of questions. So in terms of choosing your topic, the thing that I would hands down recommend is the key, most important thing is being passionate about it. Finding something that you're passionate or interested in, something that you look at and you're like, why isn't this better? Why is this like this? If you've opened the news and wanted to complain about something and not gone directly to Twitter, or even if you opened Twitter and wanted to complain about something, you know, or if you're wanting to find an issue that you wanted to look at, you know, find something that you're interested in. Find something where you look at it and you say, I could have an impact in this area. Some of the areas that have been covered in the last few projects, the winning team from 2016, my team, was on community safety. In 2017, it was around female sanitation. The group was called FemWash, and they looked at access to sanitary products. And it was a really cool project. In fact, Nyasha and the team still chat to us every now and again, and we might get them on for a talk at some point. The 2018 team, I might be getting these dates wrong now. Oh, sorry, I was the 2017 team. 2018 was FemWash. 2019 team was Masfunde, as you saw in the previous picture. And Masfunde looked at education. And the team that won locally last year looked at women entrepreneurship in Cape Town generally, and in Cape Town specifically, but in South Africa generally. So the topics have literally ranged from community safety to menstrual hygiene to education and then to entrepreneurship. Broad spectrum of stuff. Some of the other topics which have been around, we had 2 or 3 topics on the water crisis. We had one on the system around prosthetics for individuals. We had a competition that looked at environmental degradation in, let me get this right, Mauritius, and the impact on the environment of some of the government programs in Mauritius and how the incentive structures look for that. And we even had a team that did a project on broad level climate change and looking at who are the main actors in the system. So in terms of choosing your topic, choose something that you're passionate about and find team members that are passionate about it with you. Then in terms of where do you start? Now, it's always a good idea to equip yourself with as much information as possible right from the start. So, and I'm not joking on this, it sometimes starts with a Google search. Go and find articles about it, go and find thinking about it, go and find, you know, the main players in the space. You know, if you're looking at issues around, let me take another topic. Let's talk about the housing crisis in Cape Town, for example. There's a lot of issues around homelessness in Cape Town. And when you look at it, at first sight, you're like, okay, it might be around something around poverty. And then you start researching it more around homelessness in Cape Town. You're like, wait, actually, this is a historic-based issue. You know, we can trace it back to issues around the Group Areas Act. We can trace it back to issues around slavery back in the 1800s. We can even trace it back all the way to the first settlers that arrived in Cape Town and what that impact has been on it. Or you could look at if you're still looking at homelessness in Cape Town, another lens you can take on it is to look at what are the government organizations that are involved. Who are the government organizations? Who's responsible? What are they doing? Et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of starting point, Google it, and then start building a map out for yourself of the major players. So I would do something like that. Again, on the homelessness topic, I would say, what's the history of the problem? What does it look like now? What's the basic research? What's the current research on it? What are current programs that exist? And you build an information set for yourself there. Then you look at organizations that are involved. So what charities are involved with the issue of homelessness in South Africa? What legal systems are involved with that? Within Cape Town, we've got lots of stuff being done around land restoration. But who are the major actors there? Is it a government department? Is it a City of Cape Town thing? Is it something around, is it a specialized task force? How is it structured? And then you look at the NGOs and academic institutions. And then you can start, and this is a very critical part of it, but start talking to people who are involved either from helping fix the problem or are affected by the problem. So if you are looking at issues of homelessness, it might be good to be able to chat to people who run soup kitchens within Cape Town. There's a group called Extreme Soupathon run by Solly Philander. He's a comedian that's quite famous in South Africa. And Solly not only knows about homelessness in South Africa, and specifically in Cape Town, he engages actively around it. He's constantly there talking to people. And you might be able to ask him and say, hey, Solly, I'd love to, come and chat to you about this and see where you think the systemic problems are. And so once you've got a firm footing on what your understanding is from a desktop search, go and start talking to people, because that's when you'll start learning a lot. Go and apprentice with a problem. Don't just sit. If you're able to go through your whole project and not leave like Google and the websites without talking to a single person, you're missing the core essence of the project, which is to be able to go and talk and understand how the system works and how it affects people. So yeah, that's how I would start. And then how do you know you're on the right track? This is the most difficult one. You don't know if you're on the right track. But instead of saying, I'm looking for the solution, you're not here to look for solutions. You're here to look for the gaps. You're here to look for, an analysis of what is the existing environment, what is the history of it, what's the future of it, who are the people it affects, who are the organizations that are involved, and you're looking for that gap in the middle to say, and so to understand whether you're on the right track, it's not necessarily about your outcomes, but about how you're approaching it. So if you're approaching it correctly, then I would say you're on the right track, as long as you are looking at it the right way, as long as you've got a systems lens on it. And again, there's all sorts of resources on the Map the System website. So there's a 120-page document they put together on all of the different systems thinking techniques. There's some incredible webinars there from Daniela Pappy-Thornton and others. And we're here as well to host some of the webinars as well. So for being on the right track, make sure you're asking the right questions, not necessarily having the right answers. Right. In terms of finding a team, so how do you find a team? How do you join somebody? If you want to do it on your own, that's fantastic. If you are looking for a team and you don't want to do it on your own, how do you find out? How do you find a team? So the best way is literally to find somebody who's passionate about the topic as you are. So it might be friends or family or coworkers or classmates, or even activists or professionals in the space that you're working in. So the team of 5 over here from Masfunde, and it was really cool. We also managed to organize shirts and stuff for them when they went overseas to Oxford. But this team were all doing their postgraduate diploma in accounting. And so during their postgrad in accounting year, they were sitting in class. They saw the announcement come out for this competition, and they said, why don't we join? So this was just a group of friends / classmates that came together. But you can always also bring people that are passionate. So for example, if I was to do this competition on the issues around homelessness, I would chat to Solly Philander, and I would also chat to potentially Community Chest in Cape Town, who have literally worked with the city of Cape Town on a report on homelessness, and see if there's a team member from there that would like to join. There's no real limit to how you can set your teams up. You can decide exactly how you want to set it up. As long as you've got one UCT student or one UCT alumni, you can set it up how you like. If you do still need to find a teammate and you're completely, you're like, I need to find somebody. I want to find somebody who's already knows the competition and wants to work with me on this. I've set up a little Google form, and this is the easiest way for me to display the link. But we're gonna see if we can make the slides available as well. So go to cutt.ly/MTS2021 team. And when you go to that address, it'll pop up with a Google form. And you can go to the Google form and write out your name, your details, what the topic that you're doing, and what sort of teammate you're looking for. And then we'll try and pair you with somebody. It's not necessarily that we're going to be able to find the right match. If you're really, really interested in a topic around environmental stuff and somebody's looking at something from a social lens, it might have an overlap, but we might not necessarily be able to match you up, but you can always enter on your own. And then if you can't access that link or there's a problem with that at all, you can always contact us via email My email is rowan.spazzoli@uct.ac.za. But again, if you've signed up for the webinar, and I'll post the details in the chat as well, so you can see it there. Right, and that actually brings me very, very quickly to the end here. But obviously, we've got lots of time for discussions and questions. And so, yeah, if there are any questions, Ken, say if you want to ask some of the questions that have been posted on the chat at all.
Thanks, Rowan. So we currently don't have any questions. You guys can raise your hands, and then we can take some of those questions if you have any. But I just did want to say, Rowan, and I just posted it now in the chat, is that we will be sharing this presentation with all the links and the email addresses. So don't panic if you didn't have an opportunity to write everything down. And we'll have a link to this video once we upload it onto YouTube, which will be really soon. So don't panic about capturing everything. This is really just an opportunity to have a conversation. And I think another thing that I wanted to share, Rowan, was some of the feedback that the teams got from last year's competition. And I think two of the things that stood out for me was the teams that eventually made it into the top 6 and those that won. The judges gave feedback around the fact that there was real passion and interest in understanding a particular issue. So I think that's absolutely critical, as well as illustrating wanting to do deep research in it. So exactly what Rowan was saying, that this is not something that is like just desk research all on its own. You have to go out there, interview people, understand the issue a little bit better. I think, for example, if we look at the homelessness example that you gave, Rowan, there's so many NGOs that have done research that actually also illustrate that homelessness is also linked to mental health care and drug abuse. It's also linked to not being able to access opportunities in the city because it's so expensive to live here, if we're talking about Cape Town specifically. So that goes into like another element that needs to be investigated and understood. And what's really wonderful is that next year, after the registrations have closed, we're going to be hosting 3 or 4 workshops where we really delve deeply into the tools and frameworks that you can utilize from a systems thinking background that'll help you answer some of these questions. So like mapping out what your system looks like, understanding where the borders of your system are. So really, where does the problem begin and end? Who is contributing to this issue, even if maybe they're contributing to it directly or indirectly, so that by the time you put together that portfolio, you really have a comprehensive understanding of homelessness, or like what's happening in healthcare, or a tech solution that you have. And I think for me, what's also really beneficial, and this is directed to more the students who are either like doing an honors project, or if you're like in your final 3rd year or your masters, if you've already got a topic that you understand relatively well, lean into that, because you probably have a deeper immersion around the issue, whether it's your research project or something that you did an assignment on. I think this is an opportunity to like whip that out and actually think a little bit more deeply about it. I'll stop there.
Fully agree. No, I like exactly that. Like, it's about diving in and getting really, really deep into the questions and figuring stuff out. Like, it's also one of those things where if you're going to be approaching, I mean, this is one of the things that I have when I approach, especially social or environmental issues, is to not just think about doing good, but doing good and doing it well. Like, if you're exploring an issue, and especially if there's lots of people that are, I mean, there are always going to be lots of people that are involved in either solving it or creating the problem. There are people that are affected by the problem. If you're going to be doing this, like, to be able to really be able to say to yourself, I respect this, or I want to dive into this enough to be able to properly produce something well around it. I want to be able to really understand it. And regardless of whether you win the competition, be able to feed back into the system, not just take from it. And so even right from this early point, I would love everyone, if you do something in a competition, if you put together 2 slides and then decide it's you're not able to, whatever it might be, share it back into the system, make that little nudge and be able to address it. So exactly what Kensei said as well, you can work off previous projects. I mean, one of the teams that was a finalist in the 2019 competition did their topic on water conservation in Cape Town, and who the major players are and why we've got issues around water. And they'd actually used that from a project they'd done for the university the year before. And in the following year, they also did a project based on a university course that they'd done, because they'd become really passionate about it. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind with that.
Thanks, Rowan. So we do have one question coming in from Janine. So thanks for sharing that, Janine. And I think it's a question for you, Rowan, but she asks, how does your experience of participating in Map the System impact what you do now? And have you had to map the system since?
That is a great question. Yes and yes. So it has fundamentally affected the way I do stuff when it comes to, when I want to fix an issue. The kind of common entrepreneurial trope is, oh, I had a good idea. That I don't go with that anymore. In fact, when people come to me and say, I've got a great idea, I'm like, okay, but where's your groundwork on it? Like, where have you been? And so in terms of like how it's affected me, I use it. So I'm currently working on a project called SME Go. It's a funding platform for small businesses. But when we started the project, our first thing was looking at, in fact, it actually started from a Map the System project that Papama had done, which is an NGO based in Cape Town, where you see students. It's the one around, they were the winners last year of the regional final. But they were looking at what the systematic impact of COVID would be. And they interviewed 200 entrepreneurs in the space of 2 weeks, and they were able to produce a report and give some information around what this impact would be. When we saw that report and we were able to take it and look at it further, we were able to say, well, who else should we chat in the space? So we chatted. The starting point wasn't just an idea. The starting point was, all right, we know there's a problem here around funding for SMEs. We know there's something. There's something, and we don't understand it. So what we did is that we arranged 20 calls with 20 entrepreneurs. We chatted to them deeply about what the issues were. One of the entrepreneurs, a wonderful human being called Desiree, said that she'd applied for all sorts of things. She'd applied for this and that. She'd applied for this one, and like no feedback, absolutely nothing. So when we built our system, we made sure that there's an actual thing that says whether your application is in progress or it's rejected or it's accepted, because that communication is super important. So not only do I use it in the stuff that I do now, but in fact, the projects that I'm on at the moment are completely, like, I look at the system as a starting point, because, we're very quick to kind of think of things individually, things around an idea must be individual, the effects are individual, all that sort of stuff. But actually, we're all reliant on systems themselves. So to answer that question, yes, I use it a lot in my work. And the last time I mapped a system was literally on the current project that I'm working on. And in fact, we're kind of looking within the Bertha Centres around to how to map the system around entrepreneurship in Cape Town and UCT. What does that look like? Who are the people that are entrepreneurs? What are the organizations in place? Yeah. Thanks for the question. Oh, can't see you on mute.
We have another question from Andrew who says, I have already registered. Should I have received some kind of confirmation email?
I don't think so. It goes to a form. I'll double check that. But we'll have the registration, and we'll start sending out emails to the registered account. So Andrew, I'll go and double check that you are registered. I think that might be Andrew from the strategic thinking class. If it is, thanks, Andrew. I will double check for you that you're registered on the system. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then we also have Dr. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Shackley. I'm going to just allow you to speak, and then you can just ask your question.
Oh, hi. Thanks. I have a cartoon because my camera is not active, but that's cool.
Great cartoon. Great choice.
Yeah, thanks. It's 25 years running, baby. It's actually only 24. So if we needed resources like CAT scans, do we have access to that in any way? Like we needed to get time at a brain scanning machine. Is there any way we could get that to generate the data we'd need?
So internally within, and thanks for the question, internally within Map the System, we might not be able to put you in touch with that sort of stuff. But what I'd highly recommend is, if you're looking at a systems issue and part of it is around, access to that sort of thing, you could definitely chat to the organizations that you're interested in working with and saying, this is what we're researching on. This is the project that we have. So to answer your question, directly internally within our grouping, we don't have access to that sort of thing, but we highly recommend you go and engage with somebody who does have access to that and be able to almost say to them, this is part of what we're doing. Out of interest, what's the topic that you're looking at?
I'm specifically looking at the structure of human interface systems from a behavioral economics point of view. So I want to know what's going on in people's brains and how, let's say, government issue forms format people's behavior. For example, to give you a practical example of what I'm speaking about, we know that people in France are more likely to be organ donors. Than people in the UK. You read this, right? It's Professor Ariely stuff.
One of my favorite I don't know, psychologists, behavioral economists.
Yeah, right. And that's all down to the form, because the French form is an opt-out form, but the British form is an opt-in form. So you have to make an extra check mark to get into being an organ donor in Britain, whereas in France, you have to make an extra check mark to not be an organ donor, and people just don't make the effort. So part of what I'm thinking is there's a problem with interface systems, government regulatory interface systems, and how people interact with those if we don't have the amount of free will we think we do. And, clinical data would be useful for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the way I would sort of start looking at and unpacking that is to actually go to different government departments and ask them how they set their questions. Like some of it is, I know this from the work that I've been doing on SME Go, but when it comes to every single government department that helps small businesses has an entirely different question form every single time. So how are those sets? Who are the decision makers? What is the impact? And maybe interviewing some of the people that have to go through those. But yeah, actually the research data might also be able to supplement stuff. But remember that part of it is around the system. So who is making those decisions around questions is just as important as what those impact of those questions are. So in terms of the actual like medical research, I definitely think partnering with somebody who might be interested in that and have the access to that resources or a department around that, and then also looking at it on a broader scale and then taking it from broad to micro and back. That's a really, really exciting thing to look at, especially in South Africa, and even things around access to those sorts of questions. So, I know with SME Go and the projects that we've been working on is that the majority of South Africa accesses things on their phone. And so if we design the questions, I mean, most of us access, especially small business owners, access stuff on their phone, but most of the questions are built on websites that are optimized for desktop and laptop computers. And so what does that impact have? And, why are they designed like that? So I think that would be a really, really cool topic to explore.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the insight. I'm actually going to use that.
Awesome. Kenzie, you were going to add something in there?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that one of the great things also about attending the workshops is that we really help refine your question, because I love what we were just talking about. But I think one of the things that makes teams also successful is if you have one really simple question that the judges and the audience can understand. But also, I think just previously what we were talking about now, Rowan, with the previous question, is that Bertha Centre is an organization that has a lot of networks as well. So I know, for example, with this question, I was immediately thinking about Ideas 42, which is a consultancy firm that's been working here in Cape Town, and that looks at behavioral economics and has been partnering with the city of Cape Town to rethink how we can save water and how the government can communicate with its citizens. And for example, that would be an opportunity where we can facilitate like an introduction, and we're able to do that by understanding a lot more about what you're doing and what you're trying to address. So that's also an option as well.
Yeah. And also UCT Bertha Centre the Bertha Centre has access to, you have a department around health as well. There's a grouping of people that focus on health and innovation around that. So you know, there's lots of different little pockets that we can tap into, and I'd highly recommend to tap into lots of different ones. You know, maybe it might be that one is able to access more resources, one is able to access more research, but one is able to put you in touch with more people who are doing similar stuff, however it might be.
Yeah. Thanks, Kinsey, and thanks, Rowan. I think that gives me good groundwork to understand how to tackle the problem. And I think it's good for other people to hear if they need resources as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Shathi.
Oh, it's Shafley's just fine. You got to have the Batmanism of the title. You introduce yourself formally, but otherwise, you know, still Shafley.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Shatley.
So, Rowan, I don't see any more questions that are coming in from the chat box or from the Q&A, and I don't see any other hands raised. So I don't know if maybe there's anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up, or any information that we want to share with the audience.
From my side, just to wrap up, I get so amped about this project every single year. Kenzie knows this. I mean, Kenzie, the fact that we've only been you've only been part of the Bertha Centre for this year, and yet we've gotten so much excitement and passion about this project. And so I think one of the most important things for me is, yes, there's prizes, yes, there's a winning team that gets sent across, but if each of the teams that are part of this program are able to have a tiny shift on the system, and look, no one's gonna be able to revamp every system. In fact, you know, revamping a system is a bit of a fallacy. You're never going to get there. But what we can do is slightly shift them, bring new thinking, and really take this as an opportunity to dive in and give yourself a chance to research deeply and be able to interact and be able to go beyond just the narrative that exists in our news cycles and in our social media platforms, which is very surface level narratives around stuff. You know, people complain about, I think it would be really interesting to do a systems lens, for example, on big political protests that have happened recently, like the Brackenfell high school stuff. You know, that might be something that happened around an individual set of situations, but what is the system that led us there? And so what I think it's really an opportunity to do is to go beyond just the surface level thinking that we've become very used to, and to really dive in, and then to actually even follow careers in that way. In 2016, when I first entered Map the System, and we participated in the 2017 competition, but I'd never looked at it beyond that. I'd always wanted to be entrepreneurial, but I'd never let myself completely look at it that broadly. And so, yeah, it's a chance to even direct your own career and your passions, to learn about stuff and to make change.
Thanks, Rowan.
Kenzie, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it from our side. We'll look into people who've already registered. Please let us know if you have registered and you're not receiving any communication. You will be receiving an email after this, so you'll have both Rowan and my email address, so you can drop us an email and communicate. And I think something that's also valuable, and this is something that Rowan started this year, is that once we have the cohort of teams that are, you know, applying, is that we start a WhatsApp group, which is also super valuable to share resources and ideas. That's also another great way to communicate. But for today, we're going to bring it to a close. And then as soon as we've edited down this webinar, we'll share a link with you guys with an email and all the important information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kenzie. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been really cool. I cannot wait to see everyone's entries and work alongside everyone.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Ciao, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.